Yelena, are you here from Serbia?
Yes.
Okay, Yelena. So let me introduce you. So Yelena is from Revolutionary People's Party from Serbia. This is an anti-imperialist organization aiming to create solidarity and cooperation with the progressive and revolutionary anti-imperialist movements from other neo-colonial and dependent countries. Yelena will tell us about imperialism and unequal exchange. Please, Yelena.
Hi, thank you. So we decided to talk about unequal exchange because we want to further encourage the conversation and the interest in theory of unequal exchange within revolutionary organizations across the world. So that's important because we live in a hyper-connected world, and it's not possible to talk anymore about singular national economies as isolated entities. And instead, when analyzing economies of individual nations, you have to take into account the context of capitalist world system and its structure. That world system is based on exploitation, of course, but what we are seeing today is exploitation on a global scale. And that means that it now happens transnationally, not just within the borders of one nation, but what we are seeing is rich first world countries exploiting poor third world countries. This is being done through international institutions such as the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and others, but also through military force. The imperialist powers, the dominant world powers, impose different mechanisms to maintain these hierarchical relations between them and the oppressed nations. And one of those mechanisms is unequal exchange, which is the topic of my lecture today. Of course, workers being exploited around the world is not new, but it has also been long ago acknowledged that even within the working class, there are different levels of exploitation, and not all labor of the working class is valued equally. And the working class of the world is not homogeneous. And as a result, there is a big inequality within the working class, and the workers would usually try to transfer to higher paying jobs, which is of course to be expected because it is simply in their class interest to change their working conditions and their wages. So you would expect someone with a lower paying work to try to migrate, to transfer to higher paying work. But what is happening today is a separation of higher paying and easier work and lower paying and harder work. And that happens on a global scale, where you have the higher paying work in first world and the lower paying work in third world. And naturally, the workers from the third world, the lower paying workers, they would try to transfer to higher paying jobs, but they can't do that at this point because, very obviously, because of state borders and heavy border control, which is policed and even militarized at this point. And their right to transit and free movement is taken away from them, and migration is hindered. And now you see today, we even talk about, there's conversation about COVID passport, which is just really another form of migration control. And now these workers of the third world are left with no real possibility of a transfer to a higher paying job. And now we have this highly polarized world where you have a working class in the first world that has it actually, they are well off in a sense that their capitalist their governments have been able to grant them high wages and high standard of living and a form of a welfare state, really. And we are seeing all of a sudden working class that doesn't have a problem being working class. They are satisfied with their state, and that's not because they're not being exploited. They are, but what we are witnessing is the bulk of exploitation is actually transferred from the first world to the third world, from the center of the capitalist world system to the periphery, to the peripheral countries of the world system. So to put it simply, if you have two workers, one from the first world and one from the third world, if they do the same amount of work, the same amount of labor, and even have the same amount of productivity, the first world worker will be earning more than the third world worker. And the consequence of unequal exchange is the lower price commodity for the first world worker, because the third world worker is not only working for lower wages, but also his products are being sold in the first world, and the capitalists of the first world are the ones who are making the profit. So we are witnessing not only the segregation of the costs of labor, but the segregation of the type of labor. And in the first world, the tourism sector and the services are thriving, and exploitation of resources and production are dominating the third world. And this global division of labor results in a division of the international working class. And even though worker migration has been limited, capital migration hasn't been limited. So first world capitalists have a virtually unlimited possibility to invest. There is a virtually unlimited mobility of capital. And the first world capitalists invest in the third world and drain surplus value of labor and resources of the third world. And as a result, the third world is underdeveloped and overexploited. The lines are blurry, and there's a big gray area of semi-peripheral countries, but those are nuances that we don't really have time for right now. And of course, exploitation still happens in the first world because there is a controlled amount of migration there that lets a very specific amount of people transit into the first world in order to cover the work needed, just enough to sustain the system. And these migrants, they get the lowest paid work in the first world. They are mostly migrants and minorities. So at this point, the third world working class has not only been left with lower paying jobs, they really don't have any resources to invest. Third world countries don't have any resources to invest in their own development. The profit accumulation in the center in the first world countries benefits not only the capitalist, but the consumer or the worker of the first world as well. and as a result, we have a rise in global inequality. Solutions to this exist, of course, and even though many great revolutionary figures have lost their lives in national liberation struggles, we are seeing an international effort really to combat these structures of power that are dominating the world economy for so long. We are seeing leaders of sovereign countries that want to keep their people away from imperialist hands, and they are defying the international institutions, the military attacks, the sanctions, and they want to disconnect from these structures of the dominant world system that are rooted in colonialism. Sometimes they are successful, sometimes less so, but the effort is there. We are seeing parallel systems that are developed, and the leaders of a hopefully new free world are showing their decisiveness in anti-imperialist struggle. And our task is to organize beyond national borders and connect our isolated struggles through an anti-imperialist front. Thank you, and Revolutionary People's Party of Serbia sends their regards.
Thank you, Jelena, very much.